the closer the public gets to the goods, the closer the public gets to the actual proof, the harder the pushback is going to be. Well, I think that day has arrived. I think the pushback is real, and we are seeing it in real time unfold in many different forms.
The battle lines of the disclosure wars have been drawn, yet the most critical confrontation, the one that will define our place in the cosmos, is only just beginning. It will intensify as the secrets become more vulnerable, as they are taking fire from every angle. So, what are the disclosure wars? In simple terms, one side wants UFO secrecy to continue unabated, without compromise, more or less. The other side, however, wants logic, rationality, and freedom to win the day. Some want to be on the right side of history, while others, it seems, want to play the villain. And the villain, generally, always thinks they are right, that they are not the villains. But sometimes they may know they're wrong, or at least partly wrong, and go through their activities anyways. People will never cease to surprise you. On November of 2023, David Grusch was asked by Joe Rogan why Representatives Mike Rogers and Mike Turner were blocking the passage of the UAP Disclosure Act bill. And this is what he said in response, and I quote, "Special interests want to keep the genie in the bottle even though the toothpaste is coming out of the tube. And I think it's like a death rattle in this industrial complex that doesn't want change." Now, not everybody is as optimistic as me during this long, drawn-out war that's been underway for quite a while now. On February 25th, UFO researcher UFO Joe wrote, "So, we're allowed to summarize from that private Facebook group that Eric Davis posts in. He thinks disclosure will take another 10 years at least. Why? One reason is how easily the House GOP leadership bowed to pressure and gutted Schumer-Rounds UAP Disclosure Act bill. The rest of his post deals with eminent domain and some other related stuff. 2034. Have a good night." I'm not that pessimistic, simply because I believe in the divine spark within those that have chosen not to remain silent in the face of this crime against humanity. In October of 2023, an article was published in the County Highway magazine, authored by Walter Kern. Here is a direct quote that underscores how seriously David Grusch takes his role in fighting back against the cover-up. And I quote, "I always complete my missions," Grusch said tonight, sawing into his thick steak. "I'll complete this one too," he pledged, and I believed him. I believed he's a young man who can't turn back. The spark of the divine within Grusch doesn't want to live a life of regret.
You're not being paid for this interview?
No, I'm not.
Why are you doing this?
It's a sense of service, you know. Call me a Boy Scout or whatever. It just, when I saw the kind of wrongdoing I did, I don't want to be 60, 70 years old in the future and have that, coulda, shoulda, woulda kind of feeling where I could have made a difference. I do not want to live a life of regret.
Well, how many other people that are part of the secrecy architecture in this hour also don't want to live a life of regret? The DoD, intelligence agencies, military branches, and the aerospace industry companies that are threaded into this cover-up are going to run out of personnel that are willing to maintain a policy that doesn't serve people, humanity, Earth. It appears very unfortunately that the former head of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, was willing to go along with the program of deception.
There's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral. And it's totally frightening.
Matthew Pines, a civilian intelligence analyst, commented on X. A currently very highly cleared DoD SES recently confided to me that AARO is entirely a disinformation activity designed to cover and distract with no qualms about misleading Congress. This person also indicated they were recently given a skiff briefing on the Grusch stuff. Here's the deal. A tiny percentage of the US government is read into the UFO reality. In other words, they are on the side of the curtain that understands just how real this phenomena is on a scientific level. We, alternatively, are on the side of a multi-decade disinformation campaign that has led us all astray about our place in the universe. In this current environment, where Congress is calling out the cover-up, as well as ex-government officials doing the same, people will break ranks. This isn't to suggest they will necessarily break their NDAs, but they will stop going along with the rhetoric of falsehood that has been the status quo for many decades now. They will follow after the example of people like Lou Elizondo.
It was in this position I learned that the phenomena is indeed real.
And the reason for this is twofold. One, maintaining the rhetoric of falsehood is entirely unethical, un-American, and just plain old-fashioned wrong. And two, when you see so many officials in your own government calling out deceit, you feel emboldened to break from the archaic chain of deception that has fueled the US government's handling of this topic for so long, and instead you determine that you will tread into the light of honesty, freedom, and natural truth.
And there are technologies that we don't have, and frankly, that we're not capable of defending against based on those things that we've seen, multiple sensors. In other words, where not just people visually see it, but where it's picked up on radar, where it's seen on satellites.
What is natural truth, you ask? It is the converse of deception that is so wildly outside the bounds of human rationality that it can only be referred to as nature. So maybe we can call it nature truth. The simple act of telling the truth about our environment, our universe, our biosphere, is as natural as it gets. And that is why, along with the current environment we are in, where government officials and Congress are calling out the deception, the cover-up cannot sustain itself much longer. In the end, nature takes over. She always finds a way.
Life finds a way.
In the following clip, David tells Rogan that if the current director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, has not been briefed on the UFO crash retrieval program, then we have a serious problem. Because as he states, you're not being briefed by CIA director and some other agencies. Please read the subtitles very carefully, because this is what we are analyzing throughout this video.
And I hope that Joe Biden has been briefed on the program, so to speak. Right now, I guess if he hasn't been, and I'm happy to talk to Jake Sullivan or Avril Haines, and Avril Haines, if she's not briefed, like she's supposed to be briefed all intelligence in the country. It's 50 U.S. Code Section 3024. The Director of National Intelligence is allowed everything from all federal agencies that's intel related. Well, ma'am, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we have a problem. Because you're not being briefed by CIA director and some other agencies.
Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, we need to talk. Have you been briefed on the UFO issue? I'm talking about getting read into the deepest, most secretive special access programs among them, consisting of an alleged program that is responsible for retrieving crashed or landed non-human origin craft. It's often just referred to as the program. David Grusch called you out on the Joe Rogan show, conveying that he would be more than happy to brief you on what he knows, presumably in a classified setting. I want to know what role you're playing to end the cover-up that's hurting your fellow Americans and hurting 8 billion humans of our world. Madam Haines, you wrote that excessive classification reduces the intelligence community's capacity to effectively support senior policymaker decision-making and further erodes the basic trust our citizens have in their government. Wouldn't you agree, Madam Haines, that lying to the American public about their place in the universe is absolutely outrageous? You know, the Intelligence Community Inspector General has been investigating Grusch's claims for well over 2 years now. And we've just found out that the Department of Justice has apparently gotten involved via a John Greenwald FOIA drop. In fact, here is some commentary on that very drop. On April 18th, Lou Elizondo wrote, "Chris, I wonder when did DOD authorize Kirkpatrick to use the Signal app for official US business and correspondence? You and I would have been crucified for doing that while we were in the government. And when did they allow personal identifiable info of US citizens to be released? Contrary to Privacy Act of 1974. I guess it's more of the same regarding rules that apply to thee but not to me." Lucia's lab responds, "Laugh out loud, many of the DOD guys are on there." To which Lou Elizondo responds, "Yes, but they don't conduct official government business on it. That's a big no-no, unless you are AARO, I guess. Does anyone else see the issue that this is now much bigger than UAPs? We are witnessing the demise of democracy for the sake of gatekeeping. A very dangerous road, if you ask me." So, if the alleged cover-up is really happening, it's coming out probably sooner rather than later. What will you do to soften the landing, Madam Haines? Grusch has even stated that the executive branch hasn't been getting properly briefed on this issue, which ties directly into your admonishment that there are deficiencies in the classification system.
So going back to your earlier question about presidents, many administrations ago, a lot of the presidents were in the know, right? However, it's vacillated over the years where certain chief executives aren't necessarily briefed all aspects of the program. So you have, a commander-in-chief is also our chief diplomats, and they do need to know if there is a foreign entity, adversary, friend, whatever, out there so they can form foreign policy for the country. But when you are not telling, it's like classifying the existence of Russia.
It's like classifying the existence of Russia. Madam Haines, we are in some really deep shit if the commander-in-chief is not getting a full read-on regarding what is known and understood about non-human intelligences engaging our planet. Dare I remind you that David Grusch stated in the debrief article that broke his story, and I quote, "It was dangerous for this 80 years arms race to continue in secrecy because it further inhibits the world populace to be prepared for an unexpected non-human intelligence contact scenario. If what David Grusch says is true about this presence, and there's good reason to assess it is true, which we'll cover later, then the president not being fully in the loop is a grave national security danger. And as Director of National Intelligence, you are charged to do something about this. This isn't the only time that David Grusch has called you out, Madam Haines.
I make myself available to Secretary Austin, DNI Haines, who was a recipient of my complaints. I'm happy to further brief elected officials on the specific ecosystem of secrecy down to the fine details.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. The world feels like they are taking crazy pills. So many of us, Madam Haines, perceive the UFO cover-up as an insult to our common sense intelligence. Here is David Grusch willing to brief any elected official that has the right clearances, and we're still walking around under the tyrannical thumb of bureaucrats dismantling our democracy. On April 18th, Lou Elizondo went deeper into the discussion I shared earlier with you. He wrote, Aaron, 100%. The conversation has now shifted to how much we are willing to sacrifice our democracy for the will of a few bureaucrats. Government transparency is a moral right if one believes we have a government for the people, by the people. In the past, I have been privy to many things the American people would find objectionable. It was only when the people learned the truth did real change occur. And I'm not picking on you, Madam Director. On the contrary, you have great vibes. I get a great impression from you. I think you truly care, and so I reach out to you in this way. Let's dive right into a quote from the Rogan interview with Grusch. And you know, I don't take a guy's word for it. I'm like, you know what? Myself and my trusted colleagues that had a lot of special accesses, like me, you know, we cultivated our network. And we ultimately interviewed about 40 people or so, all the way up to multi-star generals, directors of agencies, mid-level guys that literally touched it, worked inside of it, all the stuff. They brought intel reports for me to look at, you know, documents. And in a lot of that, I could cross-vet, verify with other oral sources that my high-level colleagues or I talked to. And you know, it checked out. Notice that Grusch stated that he interviewed multi-star generals, directors of agencies, and mid-level guys. Why are people of this caliber telling David Grusch that a crash retrieval program for the retrieval of alien craft is real? What is going on? Let's continue with something he said a bit later in the interview. I took those people, a lot of them, and I brought them to the Intelligence Community Inspector General when I filed my complaint. Because I don't want people to, you know, hear it from a secondhand source, you know. People call it hearsay, whatever. Though I have some firsthand knowledge I'll eventually talk about someday, I'm trying to get it cleared. But through security processes. So they could hear it and hear the details like, you know, who, what, when, where, why, where the shit is, who's in control of it, what are the cover programs, etc., etc., etc. So, and that's what deemed my complaint credible and urgent in July 2022, which is my complaint, yes, was about reprisal too. I filed that separately, eventually to the Department of Defense Inspector General. That's an ongoing investigation. But it was my congressional oversight UAP crash retrieval allegations that was deemed credible and urgent. It was sent to the Director of National Intelligence. That's you, Madam Haines. And then it was sent to the Congressional Intelligence committees around that time, July of 2022. And I eventually went to Congress in December of 2022. And it's a crazy story why it took so long. It's bleeping nuts, but I provided a total of about 11 and a half to 12 hours of classified testimony to the congressional staffers and their lawyers for both the House and the Senate. And I went, full open kimono. I mean, I told them as much as I could within my time slot, if you will. Now, notice, Madam Haines, that Grusch is crystal clear that his complaint regarding a rogue UFO crash retrieval program was deemed credible and urgent by the Intelligence Community Inspector General, based on first-hand witnesses that were interviewed by the Intelligence Community Inspector General. According to Grusch, the Inspector General got the whole enchilada, including who, what, when, why, where the NHI materials are, who's in control of it, what the cover programs are, and so on. Now, if I'm supposed to believe this is all nonsense, then tell me, why did the Inspector General deem Grusch's complaint credible and urgent? His complaint regarding a rogue crash retrieval program retrieving craft of non-human intelligence all around the world. Now, unfortunately, Grusch also complained to the Department of Defense Inspector General, not to be confused with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. The complaints to the Department of Defense Inspector General were based on reprisals he received for blowing the whistle. In the following clip, Grusch goes into some of the terror he had to endure for doing the right thing as an American patriot.
And I will say, well, I won't get into the specifics because it's part of my open investigation, besides the administrative stuff. And I don't know, it's an unknown entity to me. I do not know who did this, but their displeasure in me was made known in my personal life, and it affected my wife and I had to report that to a certain counterintelligence element and a certain law enforcement element, because right before I filed my whistleblower complaint, I felt that my life was in jeopardy. And that's what I was alluding to during the hearing, because, we'll just say when you come home and you see something, you've made somebody unhappy. And to this day, I don't know who it was. I don't think it was a foreign entity, but there was some element that I extremely angered. And I don't say that flippantly. I say that very seriously, because I thought my life was in danger.
You can't get into details because it's part of the investigation.
It's part of the investigation. At some point, I'm happy to talk about it publicly. And also, as they say in the intelligence business, you don't acknowledge your tail. So I don't want to acknowledge some other things I've noticed that maybe
but it sounds like
supposed to be known.
You believe you've been surveilled and threatened.
Oh, 100%. It was obvious to me. And, it was blatant, we'll just say, what I observed. And it was so concerning. I ended up reporting it to the authorities, and I asked my agency for certain protective measures. I can't get into that detail, but I was certainly petrified. And at the same time that those things were happening to me personally, they were happening at the same time to a certain other public figure that is known to the world, we'll just say, and another former intelligence officer near my home as well. And it was some kind of planned multi-person intimidation activity that was very disturbing. And I'll just leave it at that.
So let's recap. David Grusch complained to the Department of Defense Inspector General regarding reprisals, and to the Intelligence Community Inspector General regarding a UFO crash retrieval program without proper congressional oversight, of which even the executive branch is not always getting adequately briefed on, according to Grusch. And furthermore, partly based on the first-hand witnesses that David Grusch took to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, the Inspector General found his allegation of the UFO crash retrieval program credible and urgent. And finally, David Grusch and 2 other people have been harassed and threatened for going through official channels to report a UFO cover-up. If this is all made up and a big misunderstanding, then the aforementioned shouldn't be taking place. I would argue that clearly all of this supports Grusch's allegations. And fascinatingly, as I mentioned earlier in the video, apparently the Department of Justice is getting involved or has gotten involved with investigating Grusch's allegations. Journalist Merrick von Rennenkamp stated the following based on the very recent FOIA drop by John Greenwald. Important. Not only did the ICIG, that's the Intelligence Community Inspector General, find Grusch's allegations credible and urgent, triggering legally mandated notifications to the DNI in Congress, the ICIG appears to have referred the case to DOJ, Department of Justice. That only occurs if allegations of criminal activity are substantiated. Now, I want to take a very brief detour. You should understand that the allegations by David Grusch are nothing new, though Grusch may be the highest cleared individual to ever come forward with a UFO crash retrieval and cover-up allegation. Indeed, at one point, he was ultra cleared in the DoD and IC, and I trust that if anyone understands the weight of that, surely Madam Director, the current DNI, Avril Haines, does. But he's certainly not the first one to ever come forward and promote these rumors, if you will. This has been going on for a very long time.
You know, the thing I have trouble with, it's the fact that my experience as a journalist is it's very hard for governments to keep secrets. Most things leak. Mm-hmm. Your government leaks like a sieve. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't this leaked?
Well, I've certainly been the recipient of a lot of U.S. government secrets, and I can tell you they've never seen the light of day. That's for sure. And I guess ostensibly this has leaked like a sieve for decades, but it was a very sophisticated disinformation campaign where, you know, they have allowed some of the truth to come out through some of their trade crafts, but they've disenfranchised people, they've stigmatized it, they made it like this total like wacky thing to talk about. So anybody who may come forward with that kind of information is looked like a, you know, total tinfoil hat guy, because it's a perfect amalgamation of disinformation to just make it look crazy.
I would go so far to say that retired Navy Rear Admiral Timothy Cole Gallaudet is one of those people that have leaked the truth to the American public and to the world. Beyond having been a Rear Admiral who is a current oceanographer, he also worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce as the Acting Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and Acting Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. A pretty credible guy, to say the least. On March 19th, he was on the show The Big Thing, which was hosted by Christian Harloff. He was asked what he thinks is going on regarding the UFO enigma.
Well, and I guess, Tim, I want to ask you the same thing, and I don't know how much you're able to talk about it and within classifications and things of that nature, but when it comes to a similar question, do you have a certain theory? Do you have a certain confidence of what you think is going on down there, conversations that you might have, and one of the reasons that once you did retire that you wanted to come out and start speaking about it?
Oh, I'm totally convinced that we're experiencing a non-human higher intelligence. By the way, there's non-human intelligence all around in the ocean, especially when you look at marine mammals like whales and all that. But this is non-human higher intelligence, and they, of course, are possessing craft, vehicles, whatever that can do things we can't explain. And with technology we can't explain, and with laws of physics that are not what we know them to be, obviously. So, and I am completely convinced because I know the people who were in the government programs, the legacy programs that oversaw both the crash retrieval and just the analysis of UAP data. So I'm very confident in these people, former intelligence, former DoD, and we are working as a team behind the scenes to advance disclosure, a controlled disclosure, mind you, as was put forth in the Schumer Amendment.
Similarly, in the following clip, former head of the DIA UFO program, OSAP, Jim Lakatsky, said the U.S. government has in its possession a craft of unknown origin in which the hull was successfully breached. Jeremy Corbell sets it up from episode 38 of his podcast, Weaponized.
I'm going to read you something. Beginning of chapter 9. At the conclusion of a 2011 meeting in the Capitol building with a U.S. Senator and an agency undersecretary, Lakatsky, the only one of the book's authors present, posed a question. But this is where it gets good. He stated, meaning you, Dr. Lakatsky, that the United States was in possession of a craft of unknown origin and had successfully gained access to its interior. This craft had a streamlined configuration suitable for aerodynamic flight, but no intakes, exhaust, wings, or control surfaces. In fact, it appeared not to have an engine, fuel tanks, or fuel. Now there's a next part which I'll read in a minute, but what this is you're officially allowed to tell us that the United States government has in its possession a craft of unknown origin and you are able to access the inside. Is that correct?
The wording that you read is correct.
There are highly credible witnesses, many of them firsthand, going back 70 plus years, who have a resonant message. We're not alone. We've recovered craft and occupants. We track UAP, and the US government is lying to the public about their place in the universe. Do I know that Grusch is telling the truth? Of course not. Should I be surprised if he's telling the truth? Of course not. Too many witnesses over too long a period of time with too consistent of a message for me to be too surprised that Grusch's testimony holds much accuracy. Should I be incredibly disturbed if it turns out he's telling the truth, Madam Director? Of course I should be. On December 9th, I wrote, unpopular take. The cover-up will be more disturbing to the public than the revelations of aliens. What are you going to do, Madam Haines, to soften the landing? The secrecy is no longer workable, functioning, nor able to persist. How much longer is the U.S. government going to hold the policy of lying to the public about the greatest discovery in all of human history? There are alien artifacts on our planet right now, according to Grusch and other witnesses. Since the cover-up is no longer achievable and only serves as a liability, I trust that you will be a part of the solution as a true patriot. The best way to soften the landing, in my view, is to expedite disclosure of these realities. This isn't fine wine, Madam Haines. Trying to uphold what can't be upheld is pure insanity. Before we dive into the next segment, I want to reiterate a partial direct quote by David Grusch from when he was on Rogan, and I quote, "And we ultimately interviewed about 40 people or so, all the way up to multi-star generals, directors of agencies, mid-level guys that literally touched it, worked inside of it, all the stuff. Why is that so significant? Because if Grusch is not a pathological liar, and I don't think he is, then he probably actually did speak with multi-star generals, directors of agencies, and mid-level guys that literally touched the NHI craft. What does that mean if he's telling the truth? It means there's clearly a UFO cover-up, and high-level officials, including multi-star generals and directors of agencies, know we're not alone, and also know that the policy in place is to lie to the American public and the world at large. This is an extremely disturbing state of affairs, is it not? In the next few clips, we're going to share Grusch cites speaking directly to such high-level officials.
Well, that's the thing, is you don't really know the origin.
Right.
You know, people, even certain directors of government agencies we talked to about this issue, and they were well aware of this program, you know, they like to use the term extraterrestrial, but I'm a little skeptical about that. That's why, you know, I like to use the term NHI. And
So, can you just give us a sense of the scale of these recoveries? It's like 3, or is it?
It is double digit, and I've mentioned that publicly. I am familiar with the exact numbers. We had multiple intel officers brief us on all the numbers and where, what, when, where, how.
Where's all the stuff kept? I mean, I assume
I do know of some specific
some
locations.
Boeing Raytheon warehouse.
Yeah. However, you know, we've had multi-star generals that we talked to as well, both current and former, that, you know, said that this, you know, program is just, you know, the Wild Wild West in some sense, where there's all these silos of activity. There's no monolithic, you know, director of all these activities, and it just became this uncontrolled, unmanaged black abyss. Right. And, you know, one thing led to another. And, you know, I did talk to extremely, senior officials, both former directors of certain agencies. I had the privilege of having a relationship with them, and I talked to them about this issue, and they confirmed those details. And what was really interesting.
Wake up! Wake up!
Even certain directors of government agencies we talked to about this issue, we had multiple intel officers brief us on all the numbers and where, what, when, where, how. We've had multi-star generals that we talked to as well, both current and former. And, you know, I did talk to extremely, senior officials, both former directors of certain agencies.
Wake the hell up! But how do you know they have these items? Because you've not seen them yourself, have you?
There's certain things that I have firsthand access to that I can't publicly discuss at this time. However, myself and other colleagues interviewed, 40 individuals, both our current and former highly distinguished intelligence and military personnel that were specifically on these programs. And those that were willing, I directed to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. So the Inspector General was able to interview these people that do have direct firsthand information.
Right, so they have that information directly. Have they actually seen these vehicles?
The individuals I interviewed that I directed to the Inspector General, yes, they have the firsthand experiences, yes.
Right.
I suspect by now, Madam Haines, that you've been briefed on all of the Grusch stuff. You're obviously well aware of the 40 or so witnesses, whatever that number is, that went to the Intelligence Community Inspector General. I think you know there's a cover-up, that there's excessive classification, and that the US government is literally classifying nature. The cover-up is dying, Madam Haines. What will you do to soften the landing? Let's harken back to the original story that broke this whole thing wide open. On June 5th, 2023, the debrief.org published the article titled, "Intelligence Officials Say U.S. Has Retrieved Craft of Non-Human Origin." I will share some citations that factor into the idea that we've been developing of just how real the cover-up is. In fact, the cover-up has been institutionalized within the U.S. government. It's as extraordinary as it is disturbing. When we finally do passage into a post-disclosure world, one of the most difficult pills to swallow will be how well corroborated David Grusch was the whole time. The world collectively ignored UFO witnesses, government officials, and military officials, ex and current, that were merely trying to warn us of the state of our world, of our place in the universe. Let's begin with these citations. Carl E. Nell, a recently retired Army colonel and current aerospace executive who was the Army's liaison for the UAP task force from 2021 to 2022 and worked with Grusch there, characterizes Grusch as beyond reproach. His assertion concerning the existence of a terrestrial arms race occurring sub rosa over the past 80 years, focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin, is fundamentally correct, as is the indisputable realization that at least some of these technologies of unknown origin derive from non-human intelligence, said Carl Nell, the retired Army colonel who worked with Grusch on the UAP task force. Jonathan Gray, the intelligence officer specializing in UAP analysis at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, is speaking publicly for the first time, identified here under the identity he uses inside the agency. Jonathan Gray is a generational officer of the United States intelligence community with a top secret clearance, who currently works for the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, NASIC, where the analysis of UAP has been his focus. Previously, he had experience serving private aerospace and Department of Defense Special Directive Task Forces. The non-human intelligence phenomenon is real. We are not alone, Gray said. Retrievals of this kind are not limited to the United States. This is a global phenomenon, and yet a global solution continues to elude us. Classified briefings are often presented for Jonathan Gray and his team at NASIC. High-level classified briefing materials exist in which real-world scenarios involving UAP, as evidenced by historical examples, are made available to intelligence personnel on a need-to-know basis, he told us. I have been the recipient of such briefings for almost a decade. In his statement, cleared for publication by the Pentagon in April, Grusch asserted that UFO legacy programs have long been concealed within multiple agencies, nesting UAP activities in conventional secret access programs without appropriate reporting to various oversight authorities. He said he reported to Congress on the existence of a decades-long, publicly unknown Cold War for recovered and exploited physical material, a competition with near-peer adversaries over the years to identify UAP crashes, landings, and retrieve the material for exploitation, reverse engineering to garner asymmetrical national defense advantages. Now, in the following two passages, Dr. Gary Nolan underscores how extraordinary UFO disclosure could be for our civilization when the day finally comes that research into these recovered vehicles is used to enhance humankind, as opposed to focusing exclusively on gaining an asymmetrical advantage over adversaries. Human civilization was utterly transformed by something as small as a grain of silicon or germanium, creating the underpinning of the integrated circuits that underlie computation and now even artificial intelligence, Nolan said. Studying even small samples of purported anomalous material could lead to currently inconceivable benefits for humanity, he said. What might be represented here could be hundreds of technology revolutions ahead of us. It could be more transformative for humanity than what the microprocessor accomplished. Imagine what we could do with even a grain of knowledge about how they operate. The final passage involves Chris Mellon. And today, April 22nd, 2024, big news dropped by him. We'll cover that after this. Christopher Mellon, who spent nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community and served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, has worked with Congress for years on unidentified aerial phenomena. A number of well-placed current and former officials have shared detailed information with me regarding this alleged program, including insights into the history, governing documents, and the location where a craft was allegedly abandoned and recovered, Mellon said. However, it is a delicate matter getting this potentially explosive information into the right hands for validation. This is made harder by the fact that, rightly or wrongly, a number of potential sources do not trust the leadership of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office established by Congress. On April 22nd, Chris Mellon dropped an article on his Substack titled, "Another Signal Exchange." This is the type of information that has caused some of us to take allegations of recovered off-world materials seriously. I'm obviously not going to read the entire article, but I will share some pertinent portions. Recently, as a result of a FOIA request, the Department of Defense released some signal exchanges I had with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, former director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. The release surprised but did not offend me, as I'm a strong supporter of government transparency. However, it also reminded me of another signal message that the public might find of interest that is also pertinent to the alleged recovery of off-world technology. Here is the screenshot of the exchange Mellon is citing with an unnamed source. I'll read it. "And I are making huge progress getting into the crash retrieval program. He plans to meet with you at some point. They would be slack-jawed if they found out what we now know. Right now, we haven't gone that far back. We're dealing with the recovered UAP that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 50s. We're vacuuming up info as gets read in. We now know the management structure and security control systems and ownership of the crash retrieval. We also know who recovers landed or crashed UAPs under what authorities. We also know that a still highly classified memo by a secretary of the USAF in the 1950s is still in effect to maintain the cover on UAPs. We also know the SES-2, who's the Air Force gatekeeper. As you can see, this senior government official claimed they were being granted access to an alleged U.S. alien technology recovery and exploitation program. I won't comment on the organization they worked for, but I can confirm the individual had plausible access and was high-ranking, considerably more so than whistleblower David Grusch. Later, Mellon wrote, "I share the message below with some trepidation. I worry about the privacy of the author and the privacy of the USAF individual whose name I've redacted. I worry too that some will mistakenly assume this is a smoking gun document and all we have to do now is get the author to step forward. However, it is important to note that this individual now claims that although they became aware of the program, they were ultimately denied access. The author of the message still believes there are recovered materials, but they admit they have not seen or touched a recovered craft. So unfortunately, this individual would not be able to put this issue to rest even if they were willing to come forward, which they are not. It needs to be made crystal clear that Madam Director Avril Haines did not sign off on the recently released AARO UAP Historical Record Report. In an article titled "The Pentagon's New UAP Report is Seriously Flawed" by Chris Mellon, he wrote, "First, Whoever heard of a government report being submitted months before it was due, especially one so rife with embarrassing errors in desperate need of additional fact-checking and revision? Was AARO Director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick rushing to get the report out the door before departing, perhaps to ensure that his successor could not revise or reverse some of the report's conclusions? Second, this appears to be the first AARO report submitted to Congress that the Director of National Intelligence, DNI, did not sign off on. I don't know why, but Avril Haines and her office were quite right not to in this case, having spared themselves considerable embarrassment in the process. I'm most gratified, Madam Director Avril Haines, that you did not sign off on this report. Chris Mellon's takedown of it was as impressive as it was disturbing. Here's another interesting passage by Chris Mellon from the article. AARO also contradicts itself on the purported 40-year gap in UAP investigations on pages 21 to 22, where it reports that the famous Roswell incident was under various Air Force, GAO, Congressional, White House, and other investigations from 1992 to 2001, right in the middle of the alleged gap of 1969 to 2009. The claim on AARO, page 40, that the Roswell incident, as assessed by AARO, was due to crash debris of a lost Project Mogul intelligence balloon appears to be another significant factual error by AARO, since the alleged Mogul balloon launch on June 4th, 1947 had been canceled according to Mogul Project scientists' records, and the balloon equipment cannibalized for a later launch that never got lost, but was followed and recovered. Speaking of Roswell, the following clip from the first interview that Grusch did with journalist Ross Coulthart is quite interesting. I'll explain why after.
What can you tell me about the Roswell craft?
Fortunately, those details were not approved for me to talk about right now.
This is an enormously important citation. There are a number of crash retrievals that David Grusch tried to get cleared through the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review so that he could talk about them. Grusch got permission to talk about the alleged 1933 Magenta, Italy UFO crash, but Dopser did not give him permission to talk about the Roswell crash. This suggests that Roswell was something very different than what the Air Force wants us to believe. And that's the impression Grusch gave during his interview with Ross. But he was unable to elaborate due to the Roswell incident not getting cleared for him to discuss. Yes, I know this invites the rebuttal. Then why was he cleared to talk about Magenta? These dynamics have been covered before. Grusch has even gone into them, but that's beyond the scope of this video. There's one more clip that I want to share with you, and then I will give you some commentary. This is David speaking to Rogan. Pay very close attention to the subtitles.
And this answers a fundamental question for humanity. Are we alone, or what happens when we die? Well, I don't know about that, but are we alone? Well, the answer is we're not alone. And I know that with 100% certainty, which as an intel officer, you never say 100%, but all things pointed towards, based on the people I talked to, like Harry Reid, and I use him as an example, but I talked to the highest of the high people you could possibly talk to, if you catch my drifts.
Who are the highest of the highest people Grusch is referring to? In the first Rogan clip, Grusch mentioned that if Avril Haines hasn't been briefed on the UFO crash retrieval program by the CIA and other agencies, then we face a significant issue. This statement, albeit indirect, essentially declares that the CIA director, currently William J. Burns, and other agencies are deeply involved in the UFO crash retrieval program and its cover-up. It is entirely plausible, based on Grusch's comments, that he has discussed the UFO issue directly with CIA Director William J. Burns. If David Grusch knows we're not alone, as he claims, then very likely so does the CIA Director, along with other key agencies. Furthermore, Grusch has explicitly stated that he possesses first-hand experiences related to the UFO issue, which he is actively seeking clearance through DOPSR to discuss at least some of it publicly. This situation is profoundly scandalous. The cover-up reflects a disturbing government policy. What exactly is going on? How can there be such a rift between people within our own intelligence, military, and aerospace world and all 8 billion of us peasants? Do we not have a right to know our place in the universe? Do we not have a right to know that non-human vehicles are not only crashing all over the world, but sometimes they land where the occupants are found dead or the craft are abandoned? Landings in particular suggest intention. What are they doing? And don't we need the whole world to talk about this to get to the bottom of this profound, mysterious enigma? Does this really belong exclusively within private aerospace and governmental entities? In the December 16th, 2017 New York Times article that started this all, it was written, in the interview, Mr. Elizondo said he and his government colleagues had determined that the phenomena they had studied did not seem to originate from any country. That fact is not something any government or institution should classify in order to keep secret from the people, he said. I'm sickened by all of this. I want humanity to awaken. I want truth to be the policy, not deception. Trust your fellow man. Awaken humanity. We are slumbering in the matrix of deception. I say no more. What is it going to take to end this? Why can't our commander-in-chief simply make a speech communicating to the American public and the world at large that he's adamant to get to the bottom of this, so that we can all learn that there's some big misunderstanding, or what I think is much more likely, that we are all slumbering in the matrix of deception? Who is going to step up to the plate? In response to Mick West, Carl wrote on April 24th, 2024, resolving the Nimitz case will close the debate. Either we create at Lou Elizondo and Grusch a golden statue and make offerings to them on our knees, or UFO Twitter will become an embarrassing symbol for a long time. To which Lou Elizondo responded, Carl, if people think this is about me or Dave being right and people dropping to their knees, they have missed the whole point of our endeavors. With all due respect, our purpose is to get people off their knees and stop worshiping the fake narratives we have been told. We are not heroes. We are simply public servants, finishing the job we swore to do so many years ago. We serve you, the people. You are and have always been our boss. It's a shame more in government don't see it that way. They may not be our heroes, but they damn well sure are UFO transparency warriors. They want an end to the lies. They want an end to keeping our scientific, philosophical, theological, historical, cultural, technological, sociological, psychological, and ethical frameworks stymied, which is inevitably the case when such a groundbreaking discovery has been sequestered away from all 8 billion of us peasants. I am not here to determine how this revelation will impact humanity. I am not here to tell you what to believe. In fact, every institution has a voice and a role to play when we finally get UFO transparency. From religions and theologians to scientists and philosophers, they all can and should contribute to the conversation we finally needed to have. We deserve the truth. That truth, as profoundly paradigm shifting as it is, opens the doorway to more choices. And having choices is freedom. Curtailing those choices is servitude. I don't want to be a slave. I want to be awakened. Please do not forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You could become a patron. You could become a YouTube member. You could give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below, or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I will appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a post-disclosure world. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.